Mr. Chopra and giving him a warm Hampton Roads welcome.
All right, here we go. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to take the liberty of addressing today from over here so we can have more of a conversation. I want to begin by thanking Michael and Brian for inviting me today. I have a great deal of hopeful optimism about the region, about the Commonwealth, and about the country. And I wanted to share with you why I think this is going to be the decade we're going to see higher than expected rates of economic growth and solving some of the thornier challenges that we face not only in the region, but across the Commonwealth and the country. But I want to begin by just saying how thankful I am for some of the leaders who are in this room who I had the pleasure of working with in my prior tenure as Virginia's Secretary of Technology. Councilwoman Amelia Ross Hammond is here. I wanted to say thank you to her for her service. Thank you, Amelia. My man, my brother in arms, through his work is the Joint Committee on Technology and Science, Senator John Cosgrove. I saw minus the mustache. Senator Cosgrove, you're looking awesome. And our new Deputy Secretary for Veterans Affairs here in the Commonwealth, my good friend Jaime Arziata Soto. Jaime, where are you? There. Thank you, Jaime. So, this is our time. I will hopefully over the next few minutes convince you that our best days are ahead of us. I know you hear that all the time, and we've had this conversation in Hampton Roads, and I've been part of it or I've observed it for the last decade or so, but that there is an opportunity for a new enthusiasm, a new excitement around the economy. Part of it is because of the context that I see of a more functioning and working public-private opportunity, the pioneering government spirit that's the heart of this book that I just wrote. And I think there are a few specific suggestions that I have, humble suggestions, for where I think Hampton Roads might go and the opportunities that are in your hands. So if you just indulge with me for a few moments, I'd like to walk you through this message and to engage in some conversation before we adjourn today. Let me begin with a little bit of data to give you some perspective. Before I walk to the slides, raise your hand. How many of you consider yourselves an entrepreneur? Even if you work in a larger organization, how many of you consider yourselves an entrepreneur? Okay, a minority of the room, but perhaps as we finish this remark, you might feel that you might see yourself a bit more in that light. Entrepreneurship is a very, very important arm of our country's economic growth story. If you take a look at just the data from 1988 to 2011, younger firms, so we love small businesses, we love large, mature businesses, but the new firms that are less than 5 years old, in aggregate, have been responsible for nearly all net job creation during that entire period of time. That's, if you look at the graph, that's the kind of bluish line at the top, which shows net job growth. And even during the difficult periods just around the economic crisis, 06 to 09, these young firms that are less than 5 years old and born with less than 20 employees accounted for they generated 8.6% economic growth during that period of time. This story of entrepreneurship is often matched with the image of Silicon Valley. And every single economic development conversation I've had has been a discussion about whether we can be, quote, the next Silicon Valley. Steve Case, a good friend of mine and a partner in Startup America, had not only believed in the prospects of more communities growing with the spirit of Silicon Valley, but he's put his own capital to work. He's launched a national initiative called Rise of the Rest. And you can see on the map the dots across the country where Steve and his bus tour has traveled around offering $100,000 grants to startups on the spot with pitch competitions to generate enthusiasm and excitement at the possibility of growing economies again by celebrating, evangelizing, supporting startups. You might note, by the way, that not a single community in the Commonwealth has yet been the recipient of the Rise of the Rest visit, but hopefully, based on our conversation today, there may be some enthusiasm to do such a thing. I'm excited about the spirit of entrepreneurship because we're at a unique moment in time where the public sector is actually becoming an enabler for private sector entrepreneurship. And I'll share more about that in a minute, but I want to put the lens about the public sector's role here, what I often call government with a lowercase g. And what this is, it reflects a more partnering mindset, one that takes advantages of some of the unique assets in the government in today's technologically driven era and more widely disseminates those capabilities to help foster new company formation, new product development. I call this open innovation, and it's the idea that more and more of what's held in the public domain be made freely available to us so we can commercialize, solve problems, make our neighbors' and friends' lives better. And open innovation is characterized by two very simple principles: handshakes and handoffs. What's surprising about an innovative state and open innovation more specifically is that it happens to be the one area where we have true bipartisanship. I spent time with Eric Cantor, with Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison, with Darrell Issa, who joined hands with President Obama to pass enabling legislation for each of what I'm about to describe for you as attributes of an innovative state. In fact, Senator Cosgrove and I had a microcosm of this in Virginia. A lot of the work that is done at the Joint Committee on Technology and Science is truly a bipartisan effort. You can't quite look at the list of bills that JCOT sponsors and see an R or a D in the ideology behind the material. It's about modernizing and improving the way our society operates and to better improve the performance of government. There are four very specific areas where we've shaken hands as a country. One, we've agreed to open up more government data. This community, more than any, is familiar with the notion that opening up government data has economic value. The Weather Channel. As many of you know, how many of you, anyone here work Landmark? Anyone here, Landmark? Behind me? Okay, my good people. So, as many of you know, weather is a $5 billion a year industry. But the source data that fuels that industry comes from the Department of Commerce, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which funds the satellites and the sensor networks that produces the raw data, which is open to anyone to consume, to build weather apps and other products and services. So we've now got bipartisan support to open up all of government's vast treasure troves of data in health and energy and education and commerce, you name it. Second, standards and convening. The role of government in the lowercase g, believe it or not, is inspired by former President Herbert Hoover, who, I must admit, I'm a Democrat. I never thought I'd write my sort of a supportive, exciting statement about Herbert Hoover, but I cover him in the book because when he was Secretary of Commerce, he said that there's an opportunity for the public and private sectors to work better. He called it the associative state. He said the government may not necessarily be best to sort of pick winners and losers, firm by firm, industry by industry, but if we can find a way to better collaborate, to find common challenges that confront sectors of the economy, we might work together to unclog some of those broken arteries and allow commerce to flourish. Anyone here from NASA Langley? What? Well, it turns out the history of aircraft production benefits from this spirit. It turns out at the end of World War I, America was ranking near the bottom of the heap in terms of aircraft production. European countries were subsidizing and building competitive aircraft manufacturers, and we were struggling to compete. Rather than subsidize or bail out the industry, Hoover decides to employ associative state principles and decides to say, let me figure out what's the barrier for our success. It turns out that we had a hard time designing airfoils and engine cowlings. So the predecessor to NASA, NACA, is funded to open up research and development collaboratively with the private sector, and the two most successful aircraft of their time, the DC-3 and the Boeing 247, share the R&D work that had been done in NACA as their designs for airfoils and engine cowlings. public-private partnership. Third, we are starting to find non-traditional problem solvers, new ideas to old problems through the issuance of challenges and prizes. Through a bipartisan act of Congress, every federal agency can now issue a challenge or a prize up to $50 million so that you who may not have a government contract, and that may be a very small minority of you in this room, but your competitors who don't have the blessings of an IDIQ with some unlimited whatever you've got going, they can now come in and solve a particular problem on challenge.gov. Like the 62-year-old retired Peruvian engineer who identified an alternative way to help stop an uncooperative vehicle that the Air Force was looking for at one of its security stops. Homeland Security had done a procurement, spent millions of dollars on a lame solution that no one adopted. These guys put up a $25,000 prize, and this Peruvian engineer took a Roomba, put some jet engine type parts in there, put a little airbag on top, and allows the officer to remote control the Roomba-like device under the uncooperative vehicle and at the right time push the button and lift the car off the ground with an airbag. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people do when they're creative and they're innovative. And last but not least, yes, it is an oxymoron, but we are launching lean government startups. While healthcare.gov was a disaster in its launch, the way it turned around within a month was because an army of entrepreneurs descended, joining hands with public sector employees who are innovative. And together, they unclogged the broken arteries and they found a way to make it work. We're launching lean startups in key, well-defined areas to make this system work better. Handshakes and handoffs. The handshakes, all four of these things are now law. We can use all of these techniques to make society work better. But handoffs require people like this table here at the family that birthed the Weather Channel. The handoff is to entrepreneurs and innovators who can make valuable products and services out of all of this capability. And therefore, we will not realize the benefits of an innovative state unless we step up and put these ideas to work. So no one's going to come here white knight saving the region while you sit back and observe passively. This requires active participation. I was inspired for this particular approach by 3 private sector companies whose stories I'll share briefly to give you context for why I believe open innovation holds the key to unlocking not only economic growth but problem solving. They are Procter & Gamble, Amazon, and Facebook. A word about Procter & Gamble. Here I learned the power of culture. The CEO of Procter & Gamble made a very bold statement about a decade or so ago that 50% of all new products and services sold under the P&G brand would be ideas that were sourced outside of the P&G lab network. Now, if you ran the P&G lab network, you thought you were the best and brightest, to wake up one morning and have your boss say that you couldn't quite cover more than half the products is sort of demoralizing. So I asked the CTO, Bruce Brown, I said, explain to me how this culture change affected you. What did you do differently? And his story was so inspiring, I wanted him to tell it to President Obama directly. That's the picture of him doing so. And it's the story of military weaponry and diapers. It turns out making diapers is harder than you might think. And what makes them hard is that you've got to place these water-absorbing pellets in the right place at the base of the diaper, at scale and at speed. They make 1,000 diapers a minute. And it turns out that they're not as good on the manufacturing side with the quality of the placement of that water-absorbing pellet at the base of the diaper, so they're not as efficient as they should be. So when they got the memo from the CEO, they decided to look beyond the walls of their organization. And they opened up their eyes to the Los Alamos National Labs. It turns out there's another organization that cares a lot about precision manufacturing with sensitive material, missiles, nuclear missiles, warheads, nuclear material in the manufacturing context. You don't want a lot of nuclear dust rolling around the shop floor. So it turns out that Los Alamos had built a very sophisticated modeling and simulation technique to handle the precision by which they placed the nuclear material in the manufacturing process. And the model that they had developed when applied by Procter & Gamble in an open source manner, helped them achieve $1 billion of cash flow improvement in their diaper production line. So that led me to introduce Bruce to the president, who then had to ad-lib one of his remarks about something about how nuclear weapons help the kids' diapers, something to the effect, it was funnier when he said it. Amazon. Jeff Bezos, like many CEOs, wants to live in the shoes of his employees and get frontline feedback. He famously sat in the call center and fielded some complaints from customers, one of whom said, I've got damaged furniture. I'm so sorry. I'll get you a new one right away. Thank you for your service, et cetera, et cetera. And as he's hanging up the phone from the call center, the clerk whose desk he's sitting at mumbles, happens all the time. He turns to the clerk and says, what do you mean it happens all the time? Oh, this is like the fourth complaint this week from someone complaining about this furniture from this company being damaged. Bezos is like, well, wait a minute. Why don't you say something? And the person's like, who am I going to say something to? What am I going to email you? What do you want from me? And he realizes that he hadn't empowered frontline workers. So Bezos decides to give every one of his employees the Andon cord. If any of you know the Toyota production system, the lean manufacturing approach, if a frontline worker in Toyota sees a damaged car come through the floor, they can pull physically the Andon cord, stop production, diagnose the problem, deal with it, and then move forward. In Amazon's case, the Andon cord power is to remove a potentially damaged product from the online catalog, cutting off its revenue, essentially. And what's empowering about this is that the frontline worker can do this without the supervisor's authority. In fact, the supervisor can't put that item back into the catalog until they've done a diagnosis and evaluate if there's in fact a problem worth figuring out. Turns out in the furniture example, a simple package change, which was feedback given back to the company, allowed them to get that corrected, and they immediately started shipping a much better quality product. So I learned from Amazon that frontline workers, we have 3 million federal frontline workers, some of whom are in this room today. Many of your corporations have frontline workers. Open innovation is about tapping into their expertise as well as that which comes from management. But it was the third case study which had the most particular relevance for me in this technologically driven era. And that's the story of Facebook. Sheryl Sandberg, the chief operating officer, and I were on stage at this panel discussing jobs in the economy. And in preparation for her remarks, she had made the notation to her staff. At the time, Facebook had about 3,000 employees. And she said, hey, prepare for me, how many folks have the job title Facebook developer? In the beginning of my interactive conversation, I'm going to ask you. Anyone here want to take a guess? How many folks have the job title Facebook developer at a company that has about 3,000 employees? Who wants to take a guess? Pick a number. 2,500. A few thousand. Weather Channel people, what do you think? Pick a number. A few thousand. 2,000. Okay, the real answer is 35,000. So who's good at math? The answer is that Facebook opened up its developer platform. If Nike wants to build a Facebook app, Nike employs the Facebook developer on Nike's payroll. And the Facebook application platform benefits from Nike's investment in building products and services. By opening up the platform, it invites entrepreneurs and innovators to convene, to join, to help build out value. In a data-driven world, our capacity to open up access to the data and to allow for the remix and the reuse of the data in combination with other sources can lead to whole new products, services, and industries. More on that in a minute. McKinsey estimated that by opening up more data, largely government-held data, but not exclusively, opening up data will unlock $3 to $5 trillion of economic value in these regulated sectors of the economy. Senator Cosgrove, take note, my friend. We have work to do, sir. This is the opportunity. There is no Silicon Valley of making valuable insights out of data. To do this, you need to understand the subject matter. You need to understand the public sector. If you wanted to leverage energy data from the government to be smarter about what we can do with offshore drilling or offshore wind, you need to understand government data, in addition to understanding technological opportunities. In healthcare, in transportation, in every sector of the economy that's regulated where data is collected in the public sector, we have an opportunity. Regions that understand the public sector can lead in this revolution. But we got to get started. Here's the challenging news. You don't need me to be Debbie Downer, but I did pull up the Hampton Roads Performs. This is the database that scorecards us as to where we are relative to a whole number of indicators in health and energy and the economy and the like. And what you'll find, and this is the depressing statistic, at 7.7 per 10,000, the rate of entrepreneurship in Hampton Roads is dead last in the Commonwealth. Worse than Southside and Southwest, Northern Virginia, and the like. The rate of entrepreneurship seems to be the Achilles heel for how this region can turn around. And if you'll indulge me in my last few minutes, I thought I'd share a few perspectives on what I think might be possible to tackle this particular challenge without massive new funding and massive new regulatory things, but things that we can do in the authorities that exist. My ideas draw from the work that I had done in the administration, focused on the president's strategy for innovation writ large. This is at whitehouse.gov/innovation if you're curious about the background. But the core of the idea is that the formula for economic growth and innovation is that you basically do three things right. One, you think about the building blocks of innovation, which in the 21st century is as much about human capital as it is about physical infrastructure. Two, you set rules of the road that actually work in favor of entrepreneurship and innovation. So you want to lower barriers to entry, and you want to accelerate more open and competitive markets. And last but certainly not least, there are certain areas where the public sector has a more direct hand in the outcome. So those regulated industries of health and energy and education, we need to catalyze breakthroughs, so we need to do more to take advantage of the role of government, in this case specifically by opening up more regional government data. So my three specific ideas are: one, thinking about the talent pool for entrepreneurship in the region. Two, to unlock all of the potential early stage capital in the region. And last but certainly not least, to open up as much of the open government data as possible, and potentially to encourage the private sector to do the same, so that this can be a font of innovative activity on the use of that data to build products and services. Idea number one: how do we build up the entrepreneurial talent pool? In my humble opinion, this is where I'd put the all-hands-on-deck effort to focus on both pipeline, grow them locally, as well as recruitment. On the grow your own locally, I learned that the team at Reinvent Hampton Roads has put forward a pretty bold idea of a governor's school for innovation and entrepreneurship. I just got a bit of a briefing on it, so I haven't gotten so deep, but the premise is really strong. For those of you that worked on that committee, I applaud you. Having read that idea, it strikes me as a very thoughtful step in ensuring that the young folks in this community are trained with the raw material necessary to be more entrepreneurial and more innovative. And if it's modeled off of the success at Thomas Jefferson's High School in Northern Virginia, where they're largely about producing scientists, to the extent that this can be more applied in the engineering domains, holds great future promise. But I'd also suggest to you that you take a look at recruitment. And the first place that I would go is immigration. This may sound weird. It may not sound like economic development, but it's right in front of us. I worked on an initiative called Startup Visa. It turns out that every year we have entrepreneurs who'd like to stay in the US and grow companies. And for obvious reasons, our system is kind of broken politically, so we don't have comprehensive immigration reform. And so we can't get sort of a common sense idea, with both Republicans and Democrats have endorsed Startup Visa, the idea that we should find ways to grant visas to people who are looking to grow American jobs. Well, one of the executive actions the president took, whether you like it or not like it, it's now there, will create 10,000 startups a year. 10,000 startups a year from entrepreneurs who qualify in the national interest to promote their businesses and to grow the economy. And the question is, where will those entrepreneurs reside? Many of them come from the most innovative institutions around the world. To me, the communities that find a way to tap into that talent and to welcome them to come to the region, what's amazing about this is you don't have to give them money. You just have to give them a letter of recommendation to help them get through the visa process. In this case, go through a mechanism that allows them to determine if you think they're worthy of support, that you think that there's an opportunity for their company to be successful. Planting the flag to say, hey, we want to grow these entrepreneurs locally, right available now. These actions went live today. We could do this at virtually no marginal cost. What's funny about this is the universities do it already. Go to ODU, go to Norfolk State, Hampton, you name it. Today, they're already recruiting faculty to come to campus, many of whom are immigrants. And they do that paperwork for them to help them come in under the various rules that exist. So I'm a believer that you want to grow your own, but you also want to attract. And this is a great place. It's a diverse place. It's a place that should celebrate its talents and its assets to bring in this new blood. Second, unleashing regional early-stage capital. The Jobs Act, what I mentioned earlier. I made this joke. Senator Mark Warner, former Congressman Eric Cantor, and Barack Obama walk into a bar, and out becomes the Washington Post's #1 idea for small businesses of 2012, and that's the Jobs Act. Raise your hand. How many of you know about the Jobs Act? Let the record show we have one lovely hand in the room, and that's because she works for Warner. I don't want to raise your hand because it's personal, but in your mind, raise your hand, are you an accredited investor? Prior to the Jobs Act, it was illegal for a company to advertise to you to raise capital. After the Jobs Act, it's now legal. Less than 4% of accredited investors today have really allocated any reasonable amount of money to the startup wing of their portfolio. So the bankers out there, you might have advice for your clients as to how much they put into risk buckets and so forth. If all you did as a community is find those accredited investors willing to take pitches from startups, you could triple, quadruple, quintuple the amount of early stage capital that's available for startups in this region without starting any new venture funds, without doing anything that requires complexity and big logical processes, just connecting people to opportunity. I'm a big fan of Zach Miller. Zach couldn't be with us today, but in spirit, he's here. Hatch, Norfolk. His 1004 program is a great example of this. If we can grow 1,000 companies with at least 4 employees over the next 5 years, that would be phenomenally impactful to the economy. How will 1,000 companies with 4 employees raise capital? Maybe they'll go through traditional channels, but maybe they'll tap into individual accredited investors. Silicon Valley's all over this. Angel List. That's a screenshot from Angel List. They're actively marketing this fact. People are setting up profiles on Angel List, I have one, where anyone can be pitched a startup plan and you can choose to invest a lot or a little. Millions of dollars are flowing from accredited investors to startups since the fall of 2013 when that provision of the law went into effect. It's law. Third idea, and my last idea, and we'll wrap. Democratizing government data. We are Virginians, so we end my remarks with our beginning with Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Jefferson was our nation's first open data innovator. He was a weather nut. He would record the weather twice a day, every day, and it turns out that on July 4th, he bought some equipment in Philly, and he said that it was clear and mild with a high of 76 degrees. Mr. Jefferson, when he was President Jefferson, directed Lewis and Clark to travel the West, but asked them to record data to be made available to the public upon their return. It is the spirit of Jefferson, which is why NOAA and the weather data ecosystem is born the way it is. It is now the federal government's default that every database of the federal government be made available in bulk to the public through application programming interfaces, exactly as Facebook's developer platform. We don't have this in Virginia at the state level. We certainly don't have this at the local level, but we could. And the more we get into the business of opening up data, the more innovation we could see in ways that we'd never even imagined. That same weather database, about 20 data scientists decided to combine climate data, weather data, with census data and other public sources. And by merging them all, they developed a brand new crop insurance product, which was so successful, they sold it to Monsanto for $1 billion. All they did was consume open government data in remixing and reusing it to build new products and services that have economic value. There's no reason why those industries can't be born in the Commonwealth, and there's certainly no reason why they can't be born here in Hampton Roads. Final point. How does all this work in reality? I just finished a project of this sort, an open data collaboration with LinkedIn, Monster, and Workday to map the unemployed veterans' skills gap. You see, I've been under the impression that we have been underserving our men and women who've served our great country as they transition back into the civilian economy by devaluing the skills that they've learned in the military. Devaluing because we've been lazy on the technical side, the data. We define everyone in our economy by one of 1,400 codes as to who you are and what you do and what you know. In today's big data world, those numbers are going up exponentially. And so I ran a bit of an experiment. What if we could read every job posting on the internet from an employer who's made a veteran hiring commitment? Let's digest those job postings for the skills that are truly in demand. Let's aggregate them by county, and let's put them on a map so we can see exactly what skills are in demand. Like in Wythe County, Virginia, healthcare was the second most common skill in demand, and there were young unemployed veterans, thanks to the VEC, the Virginia's Employment Commission database, who were seeking employment as a medical aid. Now that we can digest this data at the skill level, we can do a better job of matching. Here's the bad news. I looked in the region here in Hampton Roads, and I looked at the state. On the tech side alone, every single technology job posting in Virginia, about 28% of them are for entry-level work. Every one of those job postings could be filled by an existing unemployed vet in the state's unemployment system. Not because those folks have the tech skills right now, but they are within 3 to 6 months of tech trainable skills. They're close. They're at the 5-yard line. But the tragedy is they don't know to apply to those tech jobs, and those employers don't know to look for those vets because we're not digesting the information at the data level. We're doing it at the wrong level. If we embraced this spirit, we could find those match opportunities. We could connect people and exploit all their talents to thrive in our beautiful economy. And you can see these bubbles on this chart would be flipped in reverse, where we'd have jobs filled and talents fully leveraged to make our Commonwealth, this region, and our country a much better place. Thank you for hearing me out.